Close your eyes now, and let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of the day beginning to lift from your shoulders. Tonight, we're going to take a quiet journey, back through time, to the ancient streets of Rome. You might think of marble columns and togas, of senators and soldiers. But tonight, we'll explore something gentler, something more intimate. We'll discover the herbs and potions, the seeds and resins that Romans used to alter their minds, to ease their pain, to seek visions, or simply to drift into sleep, much as you're doing now. There's no rush. We'll move slowly through their world, one small discovery at a time. Let the images form softly in your mind, like smoke rising from an ancient brazier, curling, dissolving, reforming again. And so we begin, in the garden of a Roman physician, where the air is heavy with the scent of flowers you've never smelled, but somehow remember. Picture a small walled garden in the heart of Rome, perhaps in the year 150 C. The sun is warm but not harsh. It filters through the leaves of fig trees and casts dappled shadows across carefully tended beds of herbs. Here grows a particular plant that Romans knew well. They called it Papaver somniferum, the sleep-bringing poppy. Its flowers are delicate, tissue-thin petals in shades of white and pale purple. But it's not the flowers the physician values most. It's the seed pod that forms when the petals fall away. The physician moves slowly between the rows. His sandals make soft sounds against the earth. He carries a small bronze knife, worn smooth with use. When he finds a pod that's ready, swollen and gray-green, he makes a shallow cut along its surface. The movement is practiced, careful, almost meditative. From the cut, a white sap begins to seep. Milky. Thick. The physician will return tomorrow when the sap has dried to a dark brown resin. This is opium. The Romans didn't call it that. They used the Greek word meconian or simply called it poppy tears. There's something poetic in that phrase, isn't there? Tears from a flower. They knew its power. They had known it for centuries, learned from the Greeks, who learned from the Egyptians, who learned from peoples whose names are lost to time. The knowledge passed like a whispered secret, from garden to garden, from master to student. The physician would scrape this resin carefully, collecting it in a small clay vessel. Mixed with wine, it could ease terrible pain. A soldier whose leg was being amputated might drink it and drift away, his mind floating somewhere above the surgeon's table. A woman dying slowly might take it and find, at last, some peace. But it wasn't only for suffering. Some took it for pleasure. Some took it to dream more vividly. Some took it because they had taken it yesterday, and the day before, and their bodies now demanded it. The Romans understood this too. They saw how the poppy could offer mercy and also exact a price. In this garden, other plants grow as well. There's henbane, with its yellow flowers veined in purple. There's mandrake, its roots sometimes twisted into an almost human shape, which led to all sorts of superstitions. There's hemlock, deadly in the wrong dose, which could nonetheless numb pain when carefully prepared. The physician knows each plant's nature. He knows which parts to use and which to avoid. He knows that the same substance that heals in a small amount can kill in a large one. His knowledge is both science and art, observation and tradition. As the afternoon lengthens, he finishes his rounds. He carries his vessels back to his workroom, where mortars and pestles wait, where recipes written on papyrus scrolls are carefully stored. The work of transforming these plants into medicine will happen later, in the cooler evening hours. For now, the garden rests in the warmth. Bees move drowsily between the flowers. Somewhere nearby, a fountain trickles. The sound is constant, unchanging, like the sound of time itself flowing past. And in this moment, nothing needs to happen. The plants grow. The sun moves across the sky. The city beyond the walls hums with distant activity. But here, in this small enclosed space, there is only the quiet work of nature, the slow accumulation of knowledge, the ancient dance between human beings and the plants that alter consciousness. The physician will return tomorrow. The poppies will still be here, their pods weeping their precious tears. The cycle continues, season after season, year after year. And if you listen closely, you might hear the whisper of leaves, the buzz of insects, the soft breathing of a world that is both ancient and eternal. Now let us drift to a different scene. Evening has come. In a Roman home, not wealthy, but comfortable, the family gathers for the evening meal. The central room is lit by oil lamps, their flames small and steady. Shadows dance gently on the plastered walls. On the table sits a large ceramic vessel. It's called a crater, a mixing bowl. Inside is wine, but not wine as we know it today. Roman wine was different. Thicker. Stronger. Almost always mixed with water before drinking, because to drink it undiluted was considered barbaric, or dangerous. But this wine has been prepared specially. The paterfamilias, the father of the household, has added something to it. Perhaps it's herbs gathered from the countryside. Perhaps it's a preparation purchased from an apothecary. The Romans had many such additives, many ways to transform ordinary wine into something more. They might add wormwood, creating what would later become the ancestor of absinthe. The bitter herb was thought to be good for digestion, but it also brought a particular clarity to intoxication, a sharpness to the mind even as the body relaxed. Or they might add honey and spices, cinnamon, spikenard, saffron, creating mulsum, a sweet and warming drink. This was considered refined, sophisticated. It was served at the beginning of meals, a gentle way to open the appetite and ease the day's tensions. Sometimes they added opium to the wine. This created a drink that could carry you very far away indeed. A few sips might bring drowsiness and pleasant dreams. More might bring visions. More still might bring a sleep from which one never woke. The line between remedy, recreation, and poison was thin, and everyone knew it. The Romans were not naive about these things. Their writers, Pliny, Dioscorides, Galen, wrote extensively about the properties of various substances. They documented effects carefully. They warned of dangers. But they also accepted that humans had always sought these experiences, and likely always would. There was a practical side to it all. Wine itself was a necessity in a world where water was often unsafe. The alcohol killed harmful organisms. Adding herbs could make it medicinal as well as nourishing. It was infrastructure as much as intoxication. But there was also something more. Something harder to define. A sense that these altered states were doorways. Some drank to commune with the gods. Some drank to forget their sorrows. Some drank because the boundary between the ordinary world and some other world seemed, for a moment, permeable. In the dim light of the Roman evening, family members dip their cups into the crater. The wine is passed around. They drink slowly, discussing the day. The conversation meanders, relaxed. Someone tells a story. Someone else laughs quietly. The wine does its work. Muscles relax. Thoughts drift. The edges of things become softer. Pain, whether of the body or the mind, recedes for a while. This is one of humanity's oldest technologies, the deliberate alteration of consciousness through plant chemistry. Outside, the street is growing quieter. Most people are in their homes now. Occasionally, footsteps pass by. Occasionally, a voice calls out in the darkness. But mostly there is just the soft murmur of the family's conversation and the flickering of the lamps. The wine in the crater grows lower. Someone will add more water to it, diluting it further as the evening progresses. This is the Roman way, to make it last, to extend the gentle effect rather than seeking oblivion. There's a rhythm to it. Sip and wait. Talk and listen. Let the mind wander where it will. The substance is a vehicle, but the destination is interior. It's the landscape of thought and feeling, made somehow more navigable, more bearable, more interesting by the chemistry flowing through the blood. And what did they think about, these Romans, as they drank their altered wine? Perhaps they thought about the same things we think about: love and loss, hope and fear, the mystery of being alive and conscious in a vast, indifferent universe. Or perhaps they thought about nothing in particular, and that was the gift, to simply exist for a while without the constant chatter of concern. The lamps burn lower. The conversation grows quieter. Eventually, one by one, the family members will rise and make their way to their sleeping chambers. They will lie down on their beds, and the wine will carry them gently into dreams. And in the morning, they will wake, and the cycle will begin again. As it has always begun. As it will always begin. Morning light now. Let us walk together through a Roman marketplace, perhaps in a city like Ostia or Alexandria, where ships arrive from distant lands carrying cargo both ordinary and exotic. The market is already busy, though the day is young. Vendors call out, but their voices seem distant, as if heard through water. We're not interested in the grain merchants, or the fabric sellers today. We're looking for something else. Something tucked away in smaller stalls, sold by specialists who know their trade. Here, this stall. An elderly woman sits behind a table spread with small parcels wrapped in cloth and leather. The parcels contain seeds, dried leaves, roots, resins. Each one is a different tool for altering consciousness. Each one represents knowledge accumulated over generations. A customer approaches. He's a laborer perhaps, his hands rough from work. He speaks quietly to the woman. She nods and reaches for a particular packet. Inside are seeds, black, small, roughly oval. They come from a plant called Hyoscyamus niger black henbane. These seeds, when chewed or brewed into tea, can bring powerful effects. Visions. A sense of flying. Relief from pain and anxiety. But also danger, too many, and the visions become nightmares. The heart races. The mind loses its moorings. Some never return from the journey. The woman tells the customer how many to use. She's done this many times. She knows the doses that help and the doses that harm. He pays, a few small coins, and tucks the packet away. He'll use them tonight, perhaps. When the day's work is done, and his muscles ache and his mind is tired of being only itself. At another stall, a young man sells frankincense and myrrh. Yes, the same substances mentioned in ancient religious texts. But their use isn't purely ceremonial. When burned, they produce smoke that can be inhaled. The smoke has mild psychoactive properties. It can induce a trance-like state, a feeling of peace and disconnection from worldly concerns. The Romans used these in temples, certainly. But they also used them at home. A small brazier, glowing coals, a pinch of resin dropped onto the heat. The room fills with aromatic smoke. Breathing it, one might feel transported. Not dramatically, not like opium or henbane, but gently. Subtly. Enough to make prayer feel more potent or meditation more deep. Further into the market, there are sellers of more exotic substances. Things brought from India or Arabia or the mysterious lands beyond. There's cannabis, which the Romans knew but didn't favor as much as other cultures did. There's something called bang, which might be cannabis or might be another plant entirely. The ancient sources are unclear, and the names have shifted over time. There are mushrooms too. Not the psilocybin mushrooms of the Americas, which the Romans never encountered. But other varieties, gathered from forests, some of which contain compounds that alter perception. The knowledge of which mushrooms are safe and which dangerous is itself a kind of secret wisdom, passed down carefully, zealously guarded. The marketplace is a repository of this wisdom. It's where folk knowledge and formal medicine intersect. The physician with his garden and his scrolls knows some things. The marketplace vendor knows others. Together, they form the culture's understanding of how plants and minds interact. And always, there is ambiguity. Some come to the market seeking healing. Some come seeking escape. Some come seeking experience. They want to know what it feels like to think differently, to perceive differently, to be, for a while, someone other than their ordinary self. The Romans didn't moralize about this as much as later cultures would. They had gods who embodied intoxication, Bacchus most famously, but others too. They had festivals where altered states were not just permitted but expected. They understood that consciousness is flexible, that the sober mind is not necessarily the truest or best mind. Of course, they also had warnings. Excess was frowned upon. The person who couldn't control their intake, who became enslaved to the substance, this was seen as weakness, as moral failure. But the substances themselves were neutral. Tools. Like any tool, they could be used well or poorly. The sun climbs higher. The marketplace grows more crowded and more noisy. But we can step back now. We can let the scene fade. The vendors will be here tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. The trade continues. The knowledge persists. Generation teaching generation, an unbroken chain reaching back into the mists of prehistory, when the first human discovered that certain plants could change consciousness, and thought, this is useful. This is powerful. This is worth remembering. And so they remembered. And so do we. Dusk settles over Rome. In a small temple on the Aventine Hill, priests prepare for an evening ritual. The temple is dedicated to Cybele, the great mother goddess from Asia Minor, whose cult the Romans adopted centuries ago. The air inside is thick with incense. Not just any incense, a special mixture. The priests have prepared it according to ancient formulas. Frankincense and myrrh, yes, but also other things. Storax resin? Cannabis occasionally. Sometimes opium dissolved in wine, burned so its vapors fill the enclosed space. The ritual participants gather. They are devotees of the goddess, seeking her wisdom, her blessing, her presence. They sit or stand in the smoky dimness. The only light comes from oil lamps and the braziers where the incense smolders. Breathing deeply in such an environment, breathing that smoke for an hour, 2 hours, changes consciousness. Gradually, inevitably, the walls seem to shimmer. Sounds become distant or strangely close. The statue of the goddess, carved marble in the lamplight, seems almost to move, almost to breathe. This is intentional. The altered state is not a side effect, it is the point. How else do humans communicate with gods? How else do mortals perceive the divine? The smoke is a bridge. The changed consciousness is a doorway. Through it, the goddess might speak. Or at least through it, one might hear differently. The priests begin to chant. Low voices. Repetitive phrases. The words don't matter as much as the sound, the rhythm, the way the chanting combines with the smoke to create a space that feels separate from ordinary life. Some of the devotees begin to sway. Some close their eyes. Some report later that they saw visions, the goddess appearing to them, or scenes from the divine realm, or symbolic images whose meaning would take days to unpack. Are these visions real? The Romans would have found the question strange. The visions are experienced. Therefore they are real in the way that matters. This kind of ritual use of psychoactive substances was common throughout the ancient Mediterranean world. The oracle at Delphi in Greece may have breathed ethylene gas seeping from a crack in the earth, which contributed to her trance states and cryptic prophecies. The Eleusinian mysteries, secret religious rites that promised initiates knowledge of the afterlife, almost certainly involved a psychoactive potion called kykeon, though its exact recipe is lost to history. The Romans, inheriting Greek culture, inherited these practices too. They adapted them. Made them their own. Some rituals were public and official, sanctioned by the state. Others were private mysteries, secret societies where only the initiated knew what truly happened behind closed doors. There was an understanding that some experiences couldn't be reached through ordinary consciousness. That the divine realm, if it existed, vibrated at a different frequency. To perceive it required changing oneself, temporarily rewiring the brain's usual patterns. And the plants, the resins, the seeds, the leaves, were tools for that rewiring. They were keys to locks. They were passwords that granted access to hidden rooms of experience. Of course, not everyone approved. Roman society had its skeptics, its rationalists, its critics of these practices. Some philosophers argued that true wisdom came from clear thought, not clouded perception. Some moralists worried that the mystery cults were excuses for debauchery, that the religious experience was just intoxication by another name. But the practices persisted. They persisted because they worked, at least in the sense that they provided experiences that people found meaningful. Whether the gods were real or the visions were hallucinations didn't change the fact that people's lives were transformed by these rituals. In the temple, the ceremony continues. Time becomes elastic. Has it been an hour? 2? It's hard to tell. The smoke swirls. The chanting rises and falls. Individual consciousness begins to blur with group consciousness. Everyone breathing the same air, feeling the same effects, thinking similar thoughts. This is another function of these substances. They can synchronize minds. In the right setting, they can make people feel connected to each other in ways that normal social interaction doesn't achieve. The boundaries between self and other become porous. We are all breathing the goddess's breath. We are all children of the Great Mother. We are all one. Eventually, the ritual ends. The participants file out into the cool night air. The contrast is striking, from the hot, smoky, liminal space of the temple to the crisp, clear, ordinary world outside. Some feel reborn. Some feel exhausted. Some feel both. They make their way home through dark streets. Tomorrow they will return to their regular lives. But tonight they touched something else. Or believed they did. And in the believing, something real occurred. The temple stands silent now. The smoke gradually clears. The lamps burn down. And the mysteries remain mysteries. Move with me now to the frontier. To the northern reaches of the empire, where stone fortifications mark the boundary between Rome and the barbarian lands beyond. It's cold here. Wet. The kind of cold that seeps into bones and stays there. A soldier sits in a small room in the barracks. He's from Syria originally, sent here by the empire's need, by the great machine of military logistics that moves men like pieces on a board. He misses home. He misses warmth. He misses 100 small things that he never thought about until they were gone. On the table before him is a cup. Inside is wine, but he's mixed something into it. A powder obtained from a merchant who passes through the fort occasionally. The powder is dark brown, bitter. It's opium, but less refined than what the physician in Rome might use. Cruder. But it works. He drinks slowly. Waits. The effect creeps up gradually. First, a loosening in his muscles. The constant tension he carries, the wariness of living on the edge of the empire where death might come at any moment, begins to ease. His breathing deepens. His thoughts slow down. This is his private ritual. Not every night. He can't afford that, and he knows the danger of relying on it too much. But some nights, when the cold is too bitter and the homesickness too sharp and the fear too persistent, he allows himself this escape. Other soldiers use other things. Some favor wine alone, drunk in sufficient quantity to achieve oblivion. Some have discovered that certain mushrooms grow in the forests nearby, and that eating them creates hours of strange visions. Some use nothing at all, relying on discipline and stoicism to endure. But many use something. The reality of military life, boredom punctuated by terror, hardship leavened only by brief interludes of rest, drives men to seek relief however they can find it. The commanders know this. They mostly look the other way, as long as the soldiers can still perform their duties. In some ways, the military and psychoactive substances have always been intertwined. Alcohol before battle to dull fear. Stimulants to stay awake on watch. Painkillers for the inevitable wounds. Intoxicants afterward to forget what was done and seen. The Romans were no different. They understood that asking men to kill and die required giving them ways to cope with what they experienced. The substances were part of the infrastructure of empire, as necessary as roads and aqueducts. Our Syrian soldier feels the drug taking fuller effect now. The small room seems warmer. His memories of home grow more vivid but less painful, as if he's viewing them through a soft filter. He can recall his mother's face, his sister's laugh, the smell of the marketplace in Damascus, without the sharp ache of loss. This is what the substance gives him, not happiness exactly, but distance. A buffer between himself and his circumstances. For a few hours he doesn't have to be a soldier on a cold frontier. He can just be. Just exist. Just breathe in and out without the weight of it all. He knows he'll pay for this tomorrow. Not terribly, the dose is moderate, but he'll be sluggish, slightly nauseous, not quite himself. But tomorrow is tomorrow. Tonight is tonight. And tonight he needs this. Outside, the wind picks up. It rattles the shutters, finds every crack in the walls. Other soldiers are gambling in the common room. Someone is singing, badly, drunkenly. The normal sounds of the barracks at night. But our soldier is insulated from all that now. He's in his own world, created by chemistry, sustained by memory, bounded by the worn walls of his small room. It's not much. But it's his. His private retreat. His few hours of peace. Before the empire, before Rome, before civilization itself, humans sought these experiences. Sitting around fires, they chewed plants and stared at stars. They found that certain substances made the stars more beautiful, made the darkness less frightening, made the mystery of existence more bearable. The Roman soldier, thousands of years later, is doing essentially the same thing. The setting is different. The substance might be different. But the impulse is ancient. Universal. Eternal. He finishes his cup. Sets it down carefully. Lies back on his narrow bed. Closes his eyes. And for a while, a precious while, he is somewhere else. Somewhere better. Somewhere that isn't this cold fort on the edge of forever. The wind continues. The night continues. The empire continues. But inside one man's mind, aided by a plant's chemistry, there is warmth and peace and temporary freedom. And that, perhaps, is enough. Dawn breaks. Let us sit now in a different kind of space, a library or study, perhaps in a wealthy Roman's villa. Scrolls line the walls. Morning light angles through a window. At a desk sits a man, a philosopher, considering a question that has no easy answer. The question is this: what is the relationship between consciousness and truth? Do the altered states produced by wine and opium and sacred smoke reveal something real, or do they merely distort? Is the sober mind closer to wisdom, or is wisdom sometimes found in departing from sobriety? Roman philosophers debated this. The Stoics generally argued for sobriety, for the disciplined mind, for facing reality as it is without chemical cushioning. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote about the importance of clear thinking. And yet, even he drank wine. Even he likely used substances to manage pain in his later years. The Epicureans had a different view. They valued pleasure, but defined it subtly, not as maximum intensity of sensation, but as the absence of pain and the presence of tranquility. Might a moderate use of consciousness-altering substances achieve this? Perhaps. As long as it didn't lead to dependency, to suffering, to the loss of self-control. And then there were the mystery cults, which claimed that altered states were the only path to certain truths. That the divine couldn't be perceived by ordinary consciousness. That the deepest wisdom required temporarily shattering normal perception. Our philosopher, let's call him Marcus, though that's not his real name, has experimented himself. He's tried opium, carefully, curious about its effects on his thinking. He's participated in religious ceremonies involving sacred wine. He's fasted and meditated until his consciousness shifted without any substance at all. What has he learned? That the question is more complex than it first appears. That there isn't one answer but many, depending on context, intention, dose, setting. He has noticed, for instance, that a small amount of wine can actually sharpen certain kinds of thinking. The slight disinhibition allows connections to form that rigid sobriety might prevent. Some of his best insights have come while mildly intoxicated, not drunk, but loosened. But he has also noticed that larger doses produce only confusion. That the profound revelations felt during deep intoxication often evaporate in the morning light, revealed as nonsense. That the visions produced by powerful substances are vivid but unreliable guides to truth. And yet, there are experiences he has had that don't fit neatly into categories of true and false. Feelings of profound connection to the universe. Moments where the boundary between himself and the world seemed to dissolve. A sense of something larger, something sacred, something that ordinary language couldn't capture. Were these experiences chemically induced illusions? Or were they glimpses of something real, made accessible by the temporary rewiring of his brain? He suspects the answer is somehow both. That the chemicals don't create meaning ex nihilo but rather reveal dimensions of reality that are usually hidden by the brain's normal filtering processes. The brain, after all, is designed for survival, not for perceiving all of reality. It filters massively. It shows us only what we need to see to get food, avoid predators, reproduce. But reality is larger than survival requires. There are frequencies we don't perceive, dimensions we can't access, truths that our everyday consciousness is too narrow to contain. If substances can temporarily widen that aperture, let in more of what is really there, then perhaps they are tools for truth after all. Not the only tools, and not always reliable, but legitimate nonetheless. Marcus writes some of these thoughts down. Carefully. He knows that some of his fellow philosophers would disagree vehemently. He knows that expressing these ideas too publicly might damage his reputation. But truth matters more than reputation, and he must think through the question honestly. He also writes about the dangers. He has seen men destroyed by these substances. Has seen the way opium can become not a tool but a master. Has seen wine turn a respected citizen into a shambling wreck. Has seen religious ecstasy become an excuse for abandoning reason entirely. The line between use and abuse is real. The line between revelation and delusion is real. These substances are powerful, and power can heal or harm depending on how it's wielded. As the morning light strengthens, Marcus finishes his writing. He rolls up the scroll and places it carefully among the others. Maybe someone will read it someday. Maybe his thoughts will contribute to the ongoing conversation that humans have about consciousness, about reality, about the strange and wonderful fact of being aware. Or maybe not. Maybe the scroll will crumble and the words will be lost. But he has thought through the question as honestly as he could. That's what a philosopher does. That's the work. Outside, the city is waking up. Soon he'll leave this quiet room and rejoin the world of ordinary consciousness, ordinary concerns. But for now, in this liminal morning space, he sits with the mystery. And the mystery remains. Let us enter a small shop now, fragrant and dim. This is a perfumer's workshop, tucked into a narrow street somewhere in the heart of Rome. The perfumer is a specialist, an artist in scent, and his creations serve multiple purposes. Perfumes in ancient Rome were not just about smelling pleasant. They were medicine, cosmetics, and something more, tools for altering mood and consciousness through the sense of smell. The perfumer works at a table covered with small bottles and vials. Each contains a different essence. Rose oil from Egypt. Spikenard from the Himalayas. Cinnamon from somewhere even more distant. Frankincense. Myrrh. Amber. Musk. He is preparing a special blend for a client. Not for seduction, though some of his perfumes serve that purpose. This blend is for meditation, for prayer, for seeking visions. It will be expensive. The ingredients alone cost a small fortune. But his client can afford it, and believes the investment worthwhile. The perfumer adds each essence drop by drop. The work requires patience, intuition, years of experience. Too much of one component, and the whole blend is ruined. The proportions must be precise, the balance perfect. Scent affects consciousness powerfully, though we often underestimate it. A particular smell can trigger memory instantly, completely, bypassing conscious thought. The right combination of scents can calm anxiety, enhance focus, even produce mild euphoria. The Romans understood this. They used perfumes therapeutically. A calming blend for someone struggling with insomnia. An energizing blend for someone feeling sluggish. A clarifying blend for someone seeking mental sharpness. But they also understood that scent could be psychoactive in deeper ways. Certain resins, when their vapors are inhaled in concentration, produce effects similar to mild intoxication. The boundary between perfume and drug blurs. This particular blend the perfumer is creating contains opium-infused oil. Just a few drops. Not enough to produce strong intoxication, but enough to add a subtle dreamy quality to the experience of wearing it. The client who commissioned it is a priestess. She will wear it during religious ceremonies, believing it helps her channel divine messages. The perfumer doesn't comment on whether this belief is justified. His job is to create what is requested, to the highest standard he can achieve. Let the gods and the philosophers argue about truth. He works with essences, with chemistry, with the mysterious connection between smell and mind. He works methodically. Each addition is considered. He stops periodically to smell the blend, checking its evolution. Too floral. He adds a touch of wood essence to ground it. Better. Now it needs something unexpected, something that will make it memorable. He considers his options and adds a hint of storax. Perfect. The blend is now complete. He pours it carefully into a beautiful glass bottle, blue glass from Syria, with silver fittings. The bottle itself is art. The perfume inside is art. Together they form something that will give the priestess confidence, enhance her rituals, perhaps genuinely help her reach the altered states she seeks. In another part of the shop, other creations wait. Simple scented oils for everyday use. Love potions, though the perfumer is skeptical of their efficacy. Healing salves. Incense blends. Each represents a different application of his craft. The shop itself smells of everything and nothing, all the scents blending into an olfactory landscape that is unique to this space. Customers enter, and immediately feel different. Calmer perhaps. Or more alert. The shop itself is a kind of psychoactive environment. The perfumer has no formal education, at least not in the way a physician or philosopher does. His knowledge comes from apprenticeship, from experiment, from tradition passed down through generations of perfumers. But it is knowledge nonetheless. Deep knowledge. Practical knowledge. Knowledge that works. He wraps the blue bottle carefully in soft cloth and places it in a wooden box. Tomorrow, his apprentice will deliver it to the priestess. She will pay handsomely. And she will use the perfume for years, until the bottle is finally empty and she returns to commission a new one. This is a different path to altered consciousness than drinking opium wine or inhaling sacred smoke. More subtle. More ambient. But no less real. The priestess, wearing her perfume, entering her trance states, receiving her visions, is engaging with the same fundamental human drive, to change consciousness, to perceive differently, to connect with something beyond ordinary experience. And the perfumer, in his fragrant shop, is a facilitator of that drive. A craftsman of altered states. A quiet priest in the temple of transformed perception. The afternoon light slants through the shop's small window. Dust motes drift in the beam. The perfumer cleans his workspace, preparing for the next commission. Outside, the city continues its bustling life. But here, in this small fragrant space, time moves differently. Slowly. Carefully. One drop at a time. Evening now. Beneath the great Colosseum, in the network of tunnels and chambers where gladiators wait, a different ritual unfolds. Tomorrow, there will be games. Tomorrow, some of these men will die. A gladiator sits on a stone bench. His name is Gaius, though names matter less than categories in the arena. He is a Murmillo, a heavily armed fighter who will face a Retiarius, a net fighter, in tomorrow's match. His trainer approaches carrying a cup. Inside is a mixture, wine, honey, and something else. Opium perhaps, or an extract of henbane. Not enough to impair his fighting ability. Just enough to dull the fear. Fear is useful in small doses. It sharpens reflexes, heightens awareness. But too much fear paralyzes. Tomorrow, Gaius needs to be functional. He needs to be able to think, to react, to execute the techniques he has trained for years to perfect. Raw terror would kill him as surely as an opponent's blade. So the mixture is carefully calibrated. The trainer knows the dose. Has given it to hundreds of fighters over the years. Knows the difference between helpful and harmful, between courage and recklessness. Gaius drinks. The taste is bitter beneath the honey. He grimaces but finishes it. Then he sits, waiting for the effect to begin. Other gladiators prepare in their own ways. Some pray to Mars, to Hercules, to gods they hope are listening. Some exercise, keeping muscles warm. Some sit in silence, turned inward. And some, like Gaius, use substances to manage the psychological burden of their profession. The drugs used by gladiators and soldiers overlap. The need is similar: to face death without being destroyed by the anticipation of it. To function despite having every reason to flee. As the mixture begins to work, Gaius feels a familiar sensation. The stone walls of the chamber seem to recede slightly. The sounds of other fighters become distant. His breathing slows. The tight knot of fear in his chest loosens, doesn't disappear, but becomes manageable. This is not his first time. He has fought 17 times in the arena and survived each bout. Some were easy victories. Some were near deaths, wounds that took months to heal. Each time, he has used this preparation. It has become ritual, routine, superstition. He doesn't question whether the mixture truly helps or whether it's merely psychological. The distinction seems unimportant. It works. That's enough. The trainer moves on to other fighters. Each receives their own preparation. Each has their own needs. The trainer is part pharmacist, part psychologist, part priest. His job is to get these men through the night and into tomorrow's arena with their minds intact. Some fighters become dependent on these substances. Start needing them not just before fights but every day. The trainer watches for this. It's bad for business if a gladiator becomes unreliable, if they lose their edge. Better to die cleanly in the arena than slowly through addiction. But Gaius has been careful. He uses the mixture only before fights. The rest of the time, he trains, he eats, he sleeps. He maintains discipline. This is perhaps why he has survived 17 times while others fell at their first match. The hours pass slowly. The mixture keeps fear at bay but doesn't bring sleep. Gaius sits in a state that's neither waking nor dreaming. His mind wanders. He thinks about his childhood, about the series of bad choices and worse luck that led him here. About freedom, which seems both very close, a single good fight away, and impossibly distant. The Roman crowd loves gladiators, celebrates them, but doesn't quite see them as human. They are entertainment. Symbols. Living representations of courage and death, and the empire's power. The substances they take to endure this role are invisible to the audience, who see only the spectacle. In the morning, Gaius will walk up the ramp and into the light. The crowd will roar. He will raise his weapon in salute. And then he will fight. The mixture will still be in his system, giving him that crucial distance from his fear, that small buffer between stimulus and response. He will probably survive. He usually does. But there are no guarantees. The arena takes even the skilled, even the lucky, eventually. The mixture helps, but it can't protect against a superior opponent, or an unlucky slip or the whims of fate. For now, though, he sits in the dim underground chamber. The mixture keeps him calm. The night passes. Other fighters breathe in the darkness around him, each alone with their thoughts, their fears, their preparations. Above them, the Colosseum stands silent, waiting for tomorrow's blood. And beneath it, in these chambers, men prepare to spill it, aided by ancient chemistry, by plants that humans have used since the beginning to face what seems unbearable. The vigil continues. The night continues. The wait continues. And eventually, morning comes. Afternoon light. A physician's office in a wealthy quarter of Rome. A patient has come seeking help for chronic pain. The pain has lasted for months, survived every treatment. It interrupts her sleep, clouds her days, makes life barely worth living. The physician examines her carefully. Tests various movements, asks detailed questions. Finally, he concludes that there is no cure for her condition. The damage, perhaps to her spine, perhaps something internal that he cannot see, is permanent. But there is relief. There is always opium. He prepares a tincture. Opium dissolved in wine, a specific concentration. He explains the dose carefully. 2 small cups a day, no more. Take 1 in the morning, 1 before sleep. It will ease the pain, make life tolerable again. But he also warns her. The substance is powerful. If she takes more than prescribed, she risks dependence. Her body will adapt to it, require more and more to achieve the same effect. Eventually, she might find herself trapped, unable to stop taking it without severe suffering, unable to find peace even with it. The patient listens. She understands the risk. But the alternative, living with unmanaged pain, seems worse. She accepts the prescription gratefully. The physician watches her leave with mixed feelings. He has helped her. Given her a tool to manage her suffering. This is good medicine, the best he can offer. But he has also potentially started her down a difficult path. This dilemma is ancient. Pain is real. Suffering is real. Substances that relieve them are mercy. But those same substances can become traps. The line between medicine and poison, between help and harm, is narrow and shifting. Roman physicians wrote about this extensively. Galen, the great medical writer, documented the effects of opium in detail. He noted its remarkable power to relieve pain. He also noted how patients could become enslaved to it, how the body adapted, how withdrawal could itself be agonizing. But he didn't reject its use. He couldn't. What else was there? Suffering was the alternative. Some suffering had to be endured, yes, but some could be mitigated. Why refuse the tool that existed? The physician sits at his desk after the patient leaves. He is thinking about all the people he has prescribed opium to over the years. Most used it responsibly, gratefully, found relief without dependence. Some didn't. Some returned asking for stronger doses. Some he had to refuse, knowing they had crossed a line. One man he remembers particularly. A wealthy merchant who came initially for legitimate pain after an accident. The physician prescribed opium. The merchant took it and improved. But then, even after the injury healed, he kept taking it. Claimed the pain persisted. Eventually admitted he simply liked how it made him feel. The physician cut him off. Refused further prescriptions. The merchant went elsewhere, found other sources. Last the physician heard, the man had lost his business, his family, everything. The substance that was meant to help had consumed him. But the physician also remembers others. An elderly woman with cancer, her last months made bearable by opium. A young man with an injury that would never fully heal, able to work and support his family only because the drug managed his pain. A soldier whose mind had been shattered by war, who found in opium the only relief from his nightmares. The calculus isn't simple. Medicine never is. Every treatment involves risk. Every powerful drug is also a potential poison. The physician's job is to balance, to judge, to do more good than harm. He thinks about the mystery of why some people can use these substances moderately while others cannot. Is it weakness of character, as some moralists claim? Is it some physical difference in their bodies? Is it circumstances, desperation, the unbearable weight of life pushing them toward any escape? Probably all of these, in different combinations for different people. Human beings are complex. Suffering is complex. Relief is complex. The afternoon light shifts. Other patients will come soon. The physician must set aside his philosophical considerations and return to the practical work of healing. But the questions remain, unanswered, perhaps unanswerable. He stores his opium carefully. The vial is locked in a cabinet. He controls access to it strictly. This is powerful medicine, powerful poison. It must be respected. In his years of practice, he has seen the full spectrum of humanity's relationship with consciousness-altering substances. The good uses and the bad. The healing and the harm. The fine line between the two. He has no simple answers. Just experience, judgment, and the weight of responsibility. Each prescription is a decision that will ripple through someone's life. He tries to decide wisely. But wisdom is difficult. And the questions persist. Outside, Rome continues. Suffering continues. And the ancient plants that promise relief continue to grow, waiting to be harvested, waiting to fulfill their dual nature as both mercy and danger. Always both. Forever both. Evening descends on the Palatine Hill. In a grand villa overlooking the city, a senator prepares for sleep. His day has been long and stressful. Debates in the Senate, political maneuvering, the constant careful performance that public life requires. His slave brings him a cup. The senator takes it without comment. This is routine, a nightly ritual. Inside the cup is warm milk mixed with honey, wine, and a small amount of opium. Not much. Just enough to guarantee dreamless sleep. The senator needs this sleep. Without it, he cannot function. Cannot perform the role his position demands. Cannot maintain the sharp mind and composed demeanor that politics requires. The substance is a tool, as necessary to his work as his toga or his rhetorical training. He has used it for years. Decades perhaps. Started in his younger days when anxiety kept him awake before important speeches. Found that a small dose brought peace, brought rest. Gradually it became habit. Now he cannot sleep without it. Is this dependence? Technically, yes. But the senator doesn't see it as weakness. He sees it as pragmatic. A successful man uses available tools. This is an available tool. Therefore, he uses it. His wife knows about his nightly cup. She takes a similar preparation herself, though for different reasons. Her insomnia stems from different anxieties. Children, household management, the social pressures of being a senator's wife. But the solution is the same. They don't discuss it. It would be unseemly to acknowledge too openly this reliance on substances. Public life demands an appearance of natural excellence, of effortless competence. To admit that this excellence requires chemical support would undermine their position. And yet, around them, almost everyone in their class uses something. The demands of Roman political and social life are immense. The competition is ruthless. Anything that provides an edge, sharper thinking, calmer nerves, better sleep, is adopted quickly, quietly, universally. Some use stimulants during the day. Coffee doesn't exist yet, but there are other plants, other preparations. Things to maintain energy through long hours. Things to sharpen focus during complex negotiations. The senator finishes his cup and lies down. Within minutes, he feels the familiar sensation. Tension draining from his body. Thoughts slowing. The day's concerns fading into irrelevance. Soon he will sleep deeply, completely, until morning. This is luxury. Most Romans don't have access to opium. It's expensive. Available only to those with wealth and connections. The poor suffer their insomnia differently, endure their anxieties without chemical relief. But the senator doesn't dwell on this inequality. He dwells on nothing now. The substance does its work. His consciousness dims, narrows, finally disappears into sleep. In the morning, he will wake feeling rested. The slave will bring him a light breakfast and watered wine. He will dress in his toga, assume his public persona, and return to the Senate. No one will know that his composed competence is built partly on a foundation of carefully managed chemistry. And why should they? The result is what matters. He serves Rome effectively. His judgment is sound. His contributions are valuable. The means by which he maintains his effectiveness are private, irrelevant to his public function. This is one way Romans thought about these substances. Not as moral questions but as practical ones. Does it work? Does it allow you to function better? Then it's justified. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some philosophers and moralists argued that true virtue required facing life without chemical crutches. That dependence on substances was weakness, regardless of how well you functioned. But the senator has heard these arguments, and rejected them. Or perhaps not rejected them exactly, but simply found them inapplicable to his life. He is not seeking virtue in the abstract. He is seeking to fulfill his duties, to serve his family and his city. If a substance helps him do this, it's a tool, not a weakness. And so he sleeps. Deeply. Peacefully. The city is quiet now. The forum empty. The temples dark. All across Rome, people seek rest in various ways. Some find it naturally. Some find it through exhaustion. Some find it through substances, ancient and familiar. The night passes. Dreams come and go, or don't come at all depending on the dreamer and what they've taken. The stars wheel overhead. The moon sets. Dawn approaches. And when morning comes, the senator will rise. His slave will bring the cup again, though with different contents, something mild, something to ease the transition from sleep to waking. The daily cycle continues. The nightly ritual repeats. This is one life in Rome. One way of managing existence. One relationship with the plants that alter consciousness. It is not the only way. But it is a way. And it works, at least for now, at least for him. The villa is silent. The senator sleeps. And Rome dreams around him. Morning mist. A small house in the Suburra, Rome's crowded lower district. Inside, a widow sits motionless. Her husband died 3 months ago. An accident at the docks where he worked. Sudden. Senseless. Final. Since then, she has moved through days without truly inhabiting them. She feeds her children. She manages the household. She performs all necessary tasks. But she feels hollow, absent, as if the essential part of her died with him. A neighbor visits, an older woman who has known loss herself. She brings a gift, a small cloth bag containing dried flowers. Poppy flowers, though the neighbor doesn't say this explicitly. Just says, make tea from these. 2 flowers steeped in hot water. Drink it before sleep. The widow accepts the gift. That night, she prepares the tea as instructed. The water turns slightly cloudy. The taste is bitter but not unpleasant. She drinks slowly, sitting alone in the dim room. She doesn't know what to expect. The neighbor said only that it would help, that it would bring some peace. Within an hour, she understands. The crushing weight of grief doesn't disappear. But it becomes more distant. Bearable. She can think about her husband without immediately drowning in loss. can remember good moments without being destroyed by the fact that there will be no more such moments. For the first time in months, she feels something other than pain. Not happiness. Nothing so definite. Just spaciousness. Room to breathe. A few hours of relief from the relentless ache. She sleeps better than she has since his death. In the morning, the grief returns. It never truly left, but she has had a respite. And knowing that respite is possible, that she can have a few hours of peace when the burden becomes too heavy, makes the burden more bearable. This use of consciousness-altering substances, to manage grief, trauma, unbearable emotional pain, is ancient and human. Long before Rome, people discovered that certain plants could ease psychological suffering just as they eased physical pain. The widow is careful with the tea. She doesn't use it every night. Some nights she endures the grief naturally, feels it fully, sits with it until it recedes enough to allow sleep. But other nights, when the weight threatens to crush her completely, she makes the tea. Her children notice a change. Not dramatic. But she's more present, more able to care for them effectively. She smiles occasionally, brief and sad but genuine. She plans for the future instead of just surviving each day. Is this healing? Or is this avoidance? The question is complicated. Perhaps it's both. Perhaps healing requires some avoidance, some way to not be consumed completely by pain while the slow work of emotional recovery proceeds. The neighbor visits again. Asks gently how the widow is managing. The widow thanks her for the gift. Says it has helped. The neighbor nods, understanding. Says nothing more. There is a whole unspoken language here, passed between women who have known loss. The neighbor has her own story. Her own griefs. Her own relationship with these flowers. She doesn't share it. Doesn't need to. The gift itself is communication enough. In a sense, this is a kind of community medicine. Not official. Not prescribed by physicians. Just wisdom passed quietly from one suffering person to another. The knowledge of what helps. The sharing of tools for endurance. Roman physicians wrote primarily about physical ailments. Emotional suffering was less their domain. But ordinary people knew that emotional suffering could be as devastating as physical pain. And they shared their knowledge of what brought relief. The widow knows she cannot use the tea forever. It's a temporary support, a bridge. Eventually, she must learn to bear her grief without chemical assistance. But not yet. For now, she needs this help. And there is no shame in that. Grief is a natural response to loss. But grief that prevents functioning, that makes caring for children impossible, that threatens to destroy the griever, this grief needs intervention. Needs support. The tea is support. As weeks pass, the widow uses it less frequently. The worst intensity of grief begins to subside naturally. Time does its slow work. She starts to imagine a future, to make plans. The tea remains available, a safety net, but she needs it less. This is perhaps the best use of these substances, as temporary support during crisis, as tools that enable someone to survive long enough for natural healing to begin. The small cloth bag of flowers sits in her cupboard. A gift of mercy. A recognition of shared human fragility. A quiet acknowledgement that sometimes we need help to endure what life demands we endure. Outside, morning continues. The city wakes. The widow rises. Tends her fire. Calls her children. Begins another day. The grief remains. But it no longer consumes her entirely. And that small space, that small breathing room, makes all the difference. The flowers wait. Available when needed. Silent witnesses to human suffering and the ancient effort to ease it. Midday sun. A Roman merchant has traveled far from home, all the way to Egypt, seeking goods to trade. Alexandria's markets overwhelm him with their variety, their strangeness, their exotic offerings. He wanders through stalls selling spices he cannot name, fabrics and colors he has never seen, objects whose purpose he cannot guess. Everything is new, foreign, fascinating. At one stall, an Egyptian vendor notices his interest and calls him over. Shows him a small box of dark resin. Explains, in broken Latin mixed with Greek, that this is something special. Something powerful. Something from the East, carried along trade routes that stretch beyond imagination. The merchant is curious but cautious. What is it? What does it do? The vendor smiles, gestures vaguely. Hard to explain, he says. Better to experience. He offers a sample, a tiny piece, smaller than a grain of wheat. The merchant hesitates. But curiosity overcomes caution. He accepts the sample, places it on his tongue. The taste is bitter, strange, slightly numbing. He waits. At first, nothing. Then, gradually, a warmth spreads through his body. His perception shifts, subtly at first, then more noticeably. The colors in the market seem richer. Sounds become more distinct. His thoughts slow down but also somehow clarify. He feels remarkably good. Peaceful. Present. The constant background anxiety that he carries, about business, about the long journey home, about everything, simply dissolves. For an hour, maybe two, he wanders the market in this altered state, experiencing Alexandria as if for the first time. Eventually, the effect fades. He returns to the vendor's stall. What was that? The vendor explains, cannabis resin, concentrated, from India. Very potent. Very expensive. But worth it, no? The merchant agrees. He purchases a small amount. Enough to try again, carefully, after he returns home. Enough to share with friends, to introduce them to this discovery. This is how substances spread through the ancient world. Travelers encountered them in distant places. Tried them. Brought them home. Trade routes carry not just silk and spices but also consciousness-altering plants and preparations. Rome was a hub in this network. Goods flowed in from every direction. From India and China via the Silk Road. From Africa via Egypt. From the mysterious lands beyond Persia. Each place contributed its own knowledge, its own substances, its own techniques. The merchant's experience in Alexandria is repeated countless times across the centuries. Romans traveling to Greece discover the mysteries and their sacraments. Soldiers stationed in Gaul discover local plants and potions. Diplomats in Parthia encounter substances unknown in Rome. They bring these discoveries back. Share them. Incorporate them into Roman practice. The empire is a great mixing bowl, blending traditions from every culture it touches. But this mixing also brings questions. How do you know what's safe? How do you determine proper doses? The knowledge systems are different. What's common wisdom in one culture is dangerous ignorance in another. Our merchant, back in Rome, shares his cannabis resin with friends at a dinner party. They're intrigued. Wealthy Romans are always seeking new experiences, new sensations. The exotic carries prestige. They try it. Effects vary. One friend loves it, finds it profoundly relaxing and pleasant. Another dislikes it, feels anxious and confused. A third feels almost nothing and wonders what the fuss is about. This variability is important. The same substance affects different people differently. The same dose that's perfect for one person is too much, or too little for another. Chemistry interacts with individual biology in complex ways. The Romans noticed this. Their writers commented on it. Some people seem naturally disposed towards certain substances. Others should avoid them. Understanding yourself, your own reactions, your own tolerances, your own tendencies, is crucial. The merchant's cannabis resin becomes a minor sensation in his social circle. For a season, it's fashionable. Then interest fades as something else becomes novel. But some continue using it. Find it genuinely helpful for sleep or anxiety or creativity. This is the life cycle of substances in any culture. Introduction. Experimentation. evaluation. Some are adopted widely. Some remain niche. Some are eventually rejected. The process is ongoing, driven by curiosity and necessity in equal measure. The merchant, years later, will barely remember that day in Alexandria. It became just one more experience among thousands. But the resin he brought back contributed to Rome's ever-expanding pharmacopoeia, its knowledge base of consciousness-altering substances. And that knowledge base kept growing. Every generation added something. Every traveler contributed. Every experiment taught a lesson. The accumulation of wisdom about these plants and their effects is one of civilization's quiet projects, rarely celebrated but continuously pursued. The sun moves across the sky. The merchant conducts his business. The substances circulate through complex trade networks. And human consciousness remains endlessly curious about its own possibilities, its own plasticity, its own potential for transformation. The journey continues. Has always continued. Will always continue. For as long as humans exist, they will seek to alter how they experience existence. And the plants will be there, offering their strange gifts. Evening settles. A small rented room in the suburba. A poet sits with a stylus and wax tablet, trying to write. The words won't come. He has been trying for hours, but his mind feels dull, his imagination constrained. He has written poetry for years. Some of it has even gained modest recognition. But lately, the muse has been silent. Everything he writes feels flat, derivative, lifeless. On the table beside him sits a cup of wine. He has already drunk several cups today. Not enough to be drunk, but enough to loosen inhibitions slightly. Sometimes this helps. Sometimes it makes the words flow more easily. Today it's not enough. He considers his options. In a small box, he keeps a preparation made from herbs, a mixture that a fellow poet shared with him. It contains cannabis and other plants, ground fine and mixed with honey. A small amount stirred into wine produces a state that can be interesting. He hesitates. He doesn't like relying on such things. Believes that true poetry should come from natural inspiration, not chemical enhancement. But he also believes that inspiration can be cultivated, encouraged, invited. And if a substance helps open the door, he adds a small amount of the preparation to his wine. Stirs it. Drinks. And waits. The effect builds gradually. First, a slight change in how he perceives the lamplight. It seems warmer, more alive. Then, his thoughts begin to move differently. Less linear. More associative. Connections form between ideas that seemed unrelated moments before. He picks up his stylus again. Begins to write. The words come more easily now. Not effortlessly. Writing is still work, but more fluidly. His internal critic, usually so loud and harsh, has quieted. He can experiment without immediately judging each line. He writes for an hour, maybe longer. Time becomes slippery. When he finally stops and reads what he has written, he's uncertain. Is it good? Or does it just seem good because he's still under the influence? This is the poet's dilemma. Substances can facilitate creation, can open mental pathways that are usually closed. But they can also deceive. Make mediocre work seem brilliant. Create false confidence. The only solution is to wait. Read it again tomorrow, sober. Then judge. Sometimes the work created under influence survives sober scrutiny. Sometimes it doesn't. The only way to know is to test it. Roman poets had varying relationships with intoxication. Some wrote exclusively sober, viewing intoxication as an enemy of craft. Others used wine or other substances routinely, considering them tools like any other. Horace wrote about drinking wine while composing poetry. Acknowledged that it helped him, that it loosened something essential. But he also emphasized craft, revision, the hard work that happens after inspiration strikes. The relationship between creativity and altered consciousness is ancient and complicated. Some alterations seem to genuinely enhance certain types of creativity. The associative, divergent thinking that substances can produce might help generate novel ideas, unusual combinations. But crafting those ideas into finished work requires different mental states. Requires focus, judgment, critical thinking. These are often impaired by the same substances that enhance generation. So creative people throughout history have developed strategies. Use substances to generate raw material. Then, sober, shape that material into finished form. Or use small amounts that enhance without impairing. Or use them only occasionally, when particularly stuck. Our poet finishes his session and prepares for sleep. Tomorrow he will evaluate what he has written. Perhaps keep some of it. Perhaps discard all of it and try again. The substances don't create talent. Don't substitute for skill. But they can sometimes unlock what's already there. In the morning, he reads his night's work. Some lines are good. Better than good, genuinely interesting, original. Others are nonsense, the kind of thing that seemed profound under influence but collapses under sober scrutiny. He keeps what works. Discards the rest. Begins the process of revision, of crafting the raw material into finished poetry. This part requires patience, judgment, sobriety. No substance helps with this. Only practice, only time, only the slow accumulation of skill. By afternoon, he has a draft he's satisfied with. Not perfect. It will need more work. But it has potential. And the lines that came to him last night, the unusual associations, those remain interesting even now. Did the substance help? Hard to say definitively. Perhaps he would have found those lines eventually without it. Perhaps not. The counterfactual is unknowable. What matters is the result. The poem exists now. It didn't exist before. The path to its creation involved experimentation with consciousness. Whether that was necessary or merely helpful is almost beside the point. The poet stores his tablet carefully. Tomorrow he will continue working. Maybe sober. Maybe not. Each day is different. Each poem requires different approaches. The only constant is the work itself. The daily effort to transform thought into language, to capture something ephemeral and make it permanent. And sometimes, in pursuit of that goal, ancient plants offer their assistance. Whether that assistance is real or illusory, it has been sought for as long as humans have made art. The evening comes again. The lamp is lit. The stylus waits. And the poet sits down to work. Dawn at a small shrine outside Rome. A priestess prepares for a ritual. She has been consulted by a wealthy family seeking divine guidance about a business venture. Will the gods favor it? Should they proceed or wait? The priestess doesn't claim to hear the gods directly. That would be presumptuous, perhaps dangerous. But she has methods for entering states where signs become clearer, where intuition sharpens, where the boundary between mortal and divine thins. She has fasted for a day. This alone begins to alter consciousness slightly. The body, deprived of food, enters a different mode. Thoughts change character. Visions come more easily to those who are hungry. But fasting alone isn't enough for the ritual the family expects. They are paying well. They expect a performance, a genuine attempt to peer beyond the ordinary. She has prepared an incense. The recipe is secret, passed to her by her predecessor, who received it from her predecessor, going back generations. It contains frankincense and myrrh, certainly. But also other things. Plant materials that, when burned and inhaled, produce specific effects. She lights the incense in a brazier. The room, small, windowless, begins to fill with thick, aromatic smoke. She breathes it deeply, deliberately. Invites it into her lungs, into her blood, into her brain. The family waits outside. They will be called in when she is ready, when the goddess has been properly invoked, when the priestess has entered the necessary state. As the smoke does its work, she feels the familiar shift. The room's dimensions seem to change. Shadows deepen. The flame of the oil lamp becomes intensely interesting, containing within it what seems like infinite complexity. Her mind begins to generate images, symbols, associations. Are these messages from the gods? Or are they her own unconscious mind, made visible by the substances? The priestess doesn't worry about the distinction. The wisdom is real regardless of its source. After perhaps an hour, time is difficult to track, she calls for the family. They enter reverently, awed by the smoke, by her presence, by the sacred atmosphere. She asks them to state their question clearly. They do. Should they invest in a shipping venture to Egypt? Is the time favorable? The priestess closes her eyes. Breathes. Allows images to form. She sees ships on water, but the water is rough. She sees coins, but they are scattered, not gathered. She sees a storm, distant but approaching. She interprets these images aloud. The venture is risky. The gods do not forbid it, but they counsel caution. Perhaps delay? Perhaps wait for calmer waters, for more favorable signs. The family accepts this guidance gratefully. They leave an offering, coins, incense, a small statue. The priestess thanks them and, when they are gone, allows herself to gradually return to normal consciousness. Was her vision accurate? Will events unfold as the images suggested? Impossible to say. The future is uncertain. What she offered was not certainty but guidance, based on intuition enhanced by ritual and substance. Sometimes her predictions prove accurate. Sometimes not. But this doesn't necessarily mean failure. The purpose of such rituals isn't pure prediction. It's to help people think carefully about important decisions. To slow down, to consider, to acknowledge uncertainty. By consulting the oracle, the family has been forced to articulate their question clearly. To examine their assumptions. To imagine both success and failure. Whatever they decide now will be more considered than if they had rushed ahead without reflection. The substances the priestess uses are tools for this purpose. They don't confer supernatural knowledge. But they alter consciousness in ways that can be useful. They enable symbolic thinking, pattern recognition, intuitive leaps. In a culture that believes gods communicate through signs, through symbols, through trained interpreters, these altered states make sense. They are the technology of divine communication. The priestess cleans her ritual space. Opens the window to clear the smoke. Eats a simple meal, breaking her fast, grounding herself back in ordinary consciousness. By evening, she will feel normal again. Ready to return to everyday tasks. But part of her remains in that liminal space. Part of her is always slightly apart, slightly different, trained to access states that others cannot or will not enter. This is her role. Her service. Some Roman priests perform sacrifices. Some study texts. Some manage temples. She travels between worlds, aided by smoke and ritual and her own developed sensitivity. Is it real? The question seems almost irrelevant. The people who consult her find value in it. The process helps them. Whether the gods are truly speaking or whether she is channeling her own deep wisdom matters less than the fact that wisdom emerges. And the substances, the carefully prepared incense, the secret recipes, are part of what makes this wisdom accessible. They are keys. They are bridges. They are the technology by which one consciousness touches something beyond itself. The sun climbs higher. The priestess rests. Tomorrow there may be other consultations. Other questions. Other journeys into smoke and symbol. For now, she sits quietly. Breathes clean air. Returns fully to the ordinary world. Until she is needed again. Night in the slaves' quarters of a large household. The work is done. The masters are asleep. In the dim space where 20 people sleep crowded together, small freedoms are possible. A man in his 30s sits on his sleeping mat. His back aches from carrying heavy loads all day. His hands are rough and damaged from years of hard labor. He is exhausted but cannot sleep, a common problem among slaves, whose lives are hard enough to exhaust the body but also stressful enough to keep the mind racing. He has a small piece of opium resin. Obtained how? Better not to ask. Slaves have their own economies, their own ways of acquiring things. Perhaps he traded something. Perhaps it was a gift from another slave who pitied him. Perhaps he stole it from the household stores when no one was watching. He chews it slowly, letting it dissolve in his mouth. The taste is intensely bitter, but he's used to it. He's used to many unpleasant things. This particular unpleasantness leads to something better, so he endures it. Around him, other slaves prepare for sleep. Some talk quietly. Some pray. Some simply lie down and hope for unconsciousness. Each has their own way of managing the unbearable. The opium begins to work. His pain recedes. Not completely, it never disappears completely, but enough. Enough that he can lie down without every movement causing a fresh wave of agony. Enough that his mind can stop its frantic spinning and begin to settle. He thinks about his life. About the injustice of it. About the fact that he is a person, with thoughts and feelings and desires, but is treated as an object, as property. The opium doesn't make this reality disappear. But it makes it more distant. More bearable. In some ways, substances are even more important to slaves than to free people. Free people have choices, options, ways to change their circumstances. Slaves have almost none of these. When reality is unbearable and you cannot change reality, changing consciousness becomes crucial. Roman society was built on slavery. Millions of people living lives of forced labor, denied freedom, denied dignity. How did they survive it? Some didn't. Some killed themselves. Some died of despair as surely as of disease or exhaustion. But many survived. And part of how they survived was through whatever small reliefs they could find. Substances were one form of relief. Not the only form. There was also community, family, small acts of resistance, hope for eventual freedom, but an important form. The man on the sleeping mat knows his use of opium is risky. If caught, he could be punished severely. If he becomes dependent, he could become even less capable of performing his work, which would lead to worse treatment, which could spiral into disaster. But tonight, he doesn't care about those risks. Tonight, he needs relief. Needs a few hours where he doesn't have to feel everything so intensely. Needs sleep. He closes his eyes. The quarters are never truly quiet. People breathe, snore, shift, cough, murmur. But the sounds become distant. His consciousness narrows. And finally, blessedly, he sleeps. In the morning, he will wake early. Will return to work. Will carry his burdens, both physical and psychological, for another day. The opium will have worn off completely. But it will have served its purpose, allowed him to rest, to recover slightly, to face another day. This is survival in circumstances that shouldn't require survival. This is endurance in the face of systematic injustice. And substances, despite their risks and limitations, are tools for endurance. Roman masters knew that slaves used intoxicants. Mostly they tolerated it as long as work got done. Some even provided wine at festivals, recognizing that some release of pressure was necessary to prevent rebellion. But they didn't acknowledge what this reality meant. Didn't recognize that a system requiring people to regularly alter their consciousness just to endure was a system with fundamental problems. The slave wakes in the morning. His back still aches but less than yesterday. He rises and begins another day. The opium is gone. He'll need to find more before too long. The cycle continues. Elsewhere in the household, free people wake to their own rituals. Coffee doesn't exist yet, but they have other morning preparations. Wine with breakfast perhaps. something to ease into the day. They don't think of these as similar to the slave's opium. But they are similar. All are ways of managing consciousness to fit the demands of life. The difference is choice. The difference is circumstances. The free person chooses their morning wine. The slave turns to opium because his circumstances give him few other options for relief. But the human need, to sometimes alter how consciousness feels, to sometimes escape the raw press of reality, is universal. Crosses all boundaries of status and class. The household stirs. Another day begins. Masters and slaves, each managing existence in their own ways. Each using what tools they have. And the ancient plants that alter consciousness serve everyone, without discrimination. Available to whoever can obtain them. Offering their gifts and their dangers to all humanity equally. Sunset. The festival of Bacchus is beginning. Throughout Rome, preparations have been underway all day. This is a sanctioned celebration, a time when the ordinary rules relax, when intoxication is not just permitted but expected, even encouraged. The god Bacchus, called Dionysus by the Greeks, is patron of wine, of madness, of ecstatic experience, of the dissolution of ordinary boundaries. His festivals are opportunities for the orderly Roman world to temporarily embrace disorder. In the streets, processions form. People wear costumes, masks, wreaths of ivy and grape leaves. They carry wine jugs. They sing and dance, inhibitions already loosening even before the serious drinking begins. Some participants have prepared specially for tonight. Have fasted or purified themselves ritually. Have mixed their wine with additives, opium, cannabis, various herbs, to intensify the experience. Tonight is for going beyond ordinary consciousness. Tonight is for meeting the God. As darkness falls fully, the real celebrations begin. In private homes, at public gathering places, in the streets themselves, people drink. Not modest, diluted wine but strong wine, sometimes undiluted, usually considered barbaric but acceptable tonight. The noise level rises. Laughter, singing, shouting. Music from flutes and drums. Dancing that becomes increasingly wild, less coordinated, more trance-like. The usual masks of Roman dignity are set aside. People are loud, crude, physical, free. This is controlled disorder. Rome is a city of laws, of hierarchy, of carefully maintained order. But that order creates tension, creates pressure. The Bakshik festivals release that pressure in a controlled way. Better to have sanctioned chaos than unsanctioned rebellion. A young woman dances in the street. She has drunk more wine than she has ever drunk before. The world spins pleasantly. She feels her body in a new way, powerful, sensual, unrestrained. She dances with strangers. Men and women both. Class distinctions blur. Everyone is equal in intoxication. Is she losing control? Or finding a different kind of control? The Romans understood that sometimes losing control is sacred. That the rigid self needs to occasionally dissolve. That community is strengthened when people share these liminal experiences. The night deepens. The celebrations intensify. Some people pair off, disappearing into the shadows. The festival is associated with sexuality as well as intoxication. With pleasure in all its forms. With the breaking of normal restraints. Not everyone participates. Some Romans view these festivals with distaste, even fear. See them as dangerous, as potentially subversive. There have been periods when the Bakshik mysteries were suppressed, viewed as threats to public order. But they always return. The need for what they offer is too strong. Humans require these releases. Require times when the ordinary rules don't apply. Require experiences of ecstasy, of communion, of temporary madness. In a temple dedicated to Bacchus, the coarse celebrants gather. These are initiates into the mysteries, people who have undergone specific rituals and been granted deeper access to the god's secrets. Their celebration is more intense, more deliberately aimed at transcendence. They drink wine mixed with powerful additives. They dance for hours, rhythmic and repetitive, designed to induce trance states. They chant. They invoke the god. And some of them, in the depths of the night, achieve what they sought, a sense of ego dissolution, of merger with the divine, of touching something infinite. Are they really touching the divine? Or are they experiencing predictable neurochemical effects of intoxication and rhythmic movement and group dynamics? The question seems to miss the point. The experience is real to them. It transforms them. They return to ordinary life changed, renewed, having touched something beyond the everyday. As dawn approaches, the festival begins to wind down. People stagger home. Some fall asleep in the streets, and will wake later, confused and embarrassed. Some vomit in the gutters. Some have injuries from falls or fights. The aftermath of any mass intoxication. But most feel it was worth it. Most feel renewed. The pressures that built up in ordinary life have been released. The rigid social roles have been briefly abandoned. They have been reminded that under the masks of civilization, they are animals, bodies, creatures of earth and desire. Rome will clean up the mess. Will return to order. Tomorrow, people will resume their usual roles, their usual restraints. But they will remember last night. Will carry something of that freedom, that intensity, that connection. This is the social function of sanctioned intoxication. It's a pressure valve. It's a reminder of what lies beneath order. It's a renewal of community through shared experience of extremity. The sun rises. The city wakes. The festival of Bacchus ends. But it will return next year. And the next. And the next. As long as Rome endures, these festivals will endure. Because the needs they serve are fundamental to human social existence. The streets are littered with wine jugs and discarded costumes. Workers begin cleaning up. And somewhere, Bacchus, if he exists, if gods exist, smiles satisfied. His people have honored him properly. By embracing temporary madness. By using his sacred plants. By allowing consciousness to dissolve into something larger. Until next time. Afternoon in the Forum. Among the merchants and money changers, a specific trade flourishes quietly. This man deals in substances, opium, resins, rare herbs. His trade is legal, respected even, but also slightly marginal. People need what he sells, but they prefer not to discuss it too openly. He knows his inventory intimately. Knows which poppy fields produce the best opium. Knows which frankincense is pure and which is cut with cheaper resins. Knows the going rates, the supply chains, the rhythms of demand. Business is good. Always is. His customers span Roman society. Physicians who need supplies for their practices. Wealthy individuals who use these substances privately. Priests requiring incense for temples. Gladiators, trainers. Military suppliers. Even senators, though they send slaves to make the actual purchases. The merchant is neither moral nor immoral about his trade. He is pragmatic. He provides a service. People want these substances. If he doesn't provide them, someone else will. So he might as well profit. He does maintain certain standards. He doesn't sell to children. He warns customers about proper doses, about dangers. He has refused sales to people who were clearly already too dependent, already damaged. Not from compassion exactly, but from a sense that completely reckless selling might eventually bring official attention he doesn't want. The economics are interesting. Opium, for instance, is expensive but not prohibitively so for the middle class. A small amount costs roughly what a laborer might earn in several days. For the wealthy, it's trivial. For the poor, it's completely inaccessible unless they grow poppies themselves, which some do in small gardens. This creates a market structure. High quality, refined preparations flow to wealthy customers. Cruder, cheaper preparations serve the middle classes. The poor make do with whatever they can scrounge or grow. The same substance serves different classes in different forms at different prices. The merchant watches these patterns, notices when demand increases or decreases. After major military campaigns, demand from veterans spikes. They return damaged, seeking relief. During plague years, demand from those in chronic pain increases. During prosperous times, recreational use increases among the wealthy. He adjusts his inventory accordingly. Anticipates needs? This is just business, the same calculation any merchant makes about any commodity. That the commodity happens to be consciousness-altering plants doesn't fundamentally change the economics. A customer approaches his stall. A physician's assistant, buying supplies for his master. The merchant shows him what's available. Several grades of opium. Cannabis resin. Dried henbane. Various resins for incense. The assistant examines them carefully. Tests the opium by smell and by pressing a small amount between his fingers. Nods, satisfied. Negotiates a price. The transaction is professional, routine. Money changes hands. The substances change hands. Both parties are satisfied. After the assistant leaves, the merchant counts his coins. A good sale. He'll need to restock soon. His supplier is reliable but slow. The supply chain is long, opium from Egypt or Asia Minor, carried by ship, transferred multiple times, finally reaching Rome. Each transfer adds cost, adds risk, but also adds profit for those involved. Sometimes the merchant wonders about the broader implications of his trade. He's providing medicine, certainly. His opium eases terrible suffering. But he's also providing means for dependency, for escapism, for self-destruction. He sees both outcomes regularly. He's decided this isn't his responsibility. He's not forcing anyone to buy. People make their own choices. If they use these substances wisely, that's good. If they don't, that's unfortunate but not his fault. This is one ethical position. Not the only one, but a common one. The merchant as neutral facilitator. The substance as neutral tool. Responsibility rests with the user. Not everyone agrees with this position. Some Romans argue that selling dangerous substances is inherently harmful, that the merchant shares responsibility for the damage done. But these critics are minority voices. Most Romans accept that trade in these substances is normal, necessary, amoral. The afternoon wears on. Other customers come and go. A priestess buying incense. A wealthy man's slave buying what his master won't buy publicly. A gladiator trainer buying supplies for his fighters. Each transaction is similar. Quick, professional, discreet. By evening, the merchant closes his stall. He stores his valuable inventory carefully, locked, guarded. These substances are both precious and dangerous. Theft is a constant risk. He walks home through streets growing quiet. Thinks about dinner, about his family, about normal concerns. His trade is just his trade. It doesn't define him. He is a merchant, like any other, who happens to sell particular goods. That these goods alter consciousness, carry risks, serve needs both medical and recreational, these facts are simply the nature of his inventory. He neither celebrates nor condemns them. Tomorrow he'll return. Will make more sales. Will profit. Will continue his role in the vast network of supply and demand that connects poppy fields to physicians, resin forests to temples, human need to human satisfaction. The trade continues. Has always continued. Will always continue. And merchants like him are its infrastructure. Neither heroes nor villains. Just people doing business. The evening star appears. Rome settles into night. And somewhere, his customers use what they purchased. For better or worse. For healing or harm. For escape or enlightenment. And life goes on. Late afternoon. A mother sits with her sick child. The child, a boy of perhaps 6 years, has been feverish for 2 days. He cries frequently. Cannot sleep. Cannot find comfort. The fever is not dangerously high, but it persists, and with it comes pain that the child cannot articulate but clearly feels. The mother has tried everything she knows. Cool cloths for the fever. Gentle foods. Prayers to the household gods. Nothing has helped. The child continues to suffer. A neighbor suggests opium. Just a tiny amount, dissolved in honey water. Not enough to harm. Just enough to let the child sleep, to ease the pain. Sleep is healing, the neighbor says. The body mends itself in sleep. Anything that allows sleep is helping. The mother is uncertain. The child is so young. Opium is powerful. What if the dose is wrong? What if it causes harm rather than help? But the child's suffering is unbearable to watch. Mothers throughout history have faced this dilemma: how to balance caution against the desperate desire to ease a child's pain. Eventually, desperation wins. She obtains a small amount of opium. From a physician, from an apothecary, from someone who knows the proper dose for a child. She prepares it carefully. A tiny amount, a single poppy seed's worth of resin, dissolved in warm honey water. She gives it to the child slowly. He drinks without protest. The honey masks the bitter taste. She holds him, rocks him, waits. Within perhaps half an hour, she notices a change. The child's crying lessens. His body relaxes against hers. His breathing deepens. Soon he is asleep. Not the restless, interrupted sleep he has managed these past 2 days, but deep, peaceful sleep. The mother continues holding him. She is relieved but also anxious. Is this safe? Will he wake? She watches his breathing carefully. Steady. Regular. Good. He sleeps for several hours. When he wakes, the fever has broken slightly. He is calm, able to drink broth, able to rest without constant crying. The crisis has passed. Did the opium heal him? No. The fever had its course to run. But the opium allowed him to sleep through the worst of it. Allowed his body to rest rather than exhaust itself with pain and distress. In this sense, it did help. Significantly, Roman physicians used opium for children regularly. Carefully, with smaller doses than for adults, but regularly. They had seen that children in pain who couldn't sleep would worsen. That sleep was crucial to recovery. That the risks of a carefully measured opium dose were often less than the risks of prolonged sleep deprivation and distress. Modern sensibilities might recoil from giving opium to a child. But consider the alternatives available to a Roman mother. No antibiotics. No modern painkillers. No certain diagnosis of what was even wrong. Just a sick, suffering child and desperate desire to help. In that context, a tiny amount of opium, administered carefully, was reasonable medicine. Was mercy. Was the best available tool for a specific job. The child recovers over the following days. The mother uses the opium once more, when fever returns and prevents sleep. But soon it's not needed. The illness passes. The child returns to normal health. Years later, this child, now an adult, might not even remember being given opium. It was one illness among many in childhood. The opium was a footnote, a tool used briefly and then set aside. This is how these substances often function. Not as constant presence but as occasional assistance. Used when needed. Set aside when not. Part of the toolkit of survival in a world that offers many challenges and limited solutions. The mother stores the remaining opium carefully. It might be needed again. Children get sick frequently. Or she herself might need it someday, if pain comes to her. It's a resource, valuable, to be preserved and used wisely. She doesn't think of herself as having done anything unusual. Every mother she knows has given similar remedies to sick children. This is normal medicine. Normal care. Normal love, expressed through whatever tools are available. In our time, we have different tools. Better tools in many ways. Safer, more specific, more reliable. We can treat the causes of illness rather than just its symptoms. We can cure rather than just comfort. But the impulse is the same. The desperate desire to ease a child's suffering. The willingness to use whatever means are available. The calculation of risks and benefits. The hope that we're making the right choice. Roman mothers made these calculations with the tools they had. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the remedies helped. Sometimes they caused additional problems. But they tried. Because what else could they do? The child plays outside now. Healthy. Energetic. The illness forgotten. The mother watches from the doorway. Grateful. Relieved. And the small vessel of opium remains stored away. Waiting. Available if needed again. Silent. Potent. Merciful. Until next time. Evening in a small apartment. An old man sits alone. He was a soldier once. Fought in campaigns from Britain to Parthia. Saw things that can never be unseen. Did things that can never be undone. Now he's old, retired, living on a small pension. His body is damaged from decades of military life. His mind is damaged too, though in ways less visible. Sleep is difficult. When he does sleep, nightmares come. In quiet moments, memories intrude, violent, vivid, overwhelming. On the table before him sits a cup. Inside is wine mixed with opium. He drinks it every evening. Has drunk it for years. Decades perhaps. It's the only way he can face the night. Without it, the memories are too strong. He relives battles. Sees the faces of men he killed. Hears screams. Feels the terror of nearly dying, over and over. The past is more real than the present. With the opium, the memories don't disappear. But they recede. Become more like old stories and less like current experience. He can observe them from a distance rather than being consumed by them. Is this healthy? Probably not. He's dependent on the substance now. Physically and psychologically. If he tried to stop, the withdrawal would be terrible. But he has no intention of stopping. Why would he? The opium makes life bearable. Without it, life wouldn't be worth living. He thinks sometimes about other veterans he knows. Some manage without substances. They are stoic, or genuinely healed, or so numbed that they don't feel much of anything anymore. He's not sure which. Some use wine alone. Some use other substances. Some killed themselves years ago, unable to find any way to manage what they carried. He's surviving. Barely some days. But surviving. The opium is a tool for survival. Nothing more complicated than that. The Roman military understood that veterans struggled. Offered pensions, land grants, community. But these material supports didn't address the psychological damage. That was left to individuals to manage however they could. Some found healing through religion. Through community. Through new purposes. Some never healed but learned to function despite the damage. And some turned to substances, to chemically manage what couldn't be managed any other way. Modern language has terms for what the veteran suffers. Post-traumatic stress. Moral injury. Combat trauma. The Romans had no such terms. But they knew the phenomenon. Knew that war damaged men. Knew that some damage was invisible but devastating. The veteran drinks his cup slowly. Feels the familiar warmth spreading through his body. His muscles relax. The constant hypervigilance, the sense of being always on guard, always waiting for attack, eases slightly. He can breathe more deeply. Can think about something other than war. Can remember that he's safe now, here in Rome, far from battlefields. These facts are obvious intellectually. But trauma doesn't respond to intellectual understanding. It requires chemical intervention or time, or luck. For him, chemical intervention is what works. The opium doesn't heal the trauma, but it makes living with the trauma possible. That's enough. That has to be enough. He thinks about his life, about the years of service, about the men he served with, most dead now, from violence or disease or time, about the empire he helped defend and expand. Was it worth it? He doesn't know. Can't know. The question is too large. What he knows is that he did his duty. Survived. And now must survive the aftermath, which in some ways is harder than the service itself. At least in service, there was structure, purpose, brotherhood. Now there's just memory and time and the long, slow diminishment of age. The opium helps with all of it. With the memories. With the pain of an aging body damaged by decades of hard use. With the loneliness. With the sense of purposelessness. It softens everything. Makes the unbearable merely difficult. Is this sad? Perhaps. But the alternative might be sadder. Better to survive with chemical support than to not survive at all. The night deepens. The veteran prepares for sleep. He'll take a little more opium before lying down. Enough to prevent nightmares, or at least make them less vivid. He's calibrated the dose carefully over years of use. Knows exactly how much he needs. He lies down. Closes his eyes. And for tonight, at least, finds peace. Or something close to it. The dreams that come are gentler. The night passes. Morning will come. And tomorrow he'll do it again. And the next night. And the next. Until eventually there are no more nights. Until his service is finally, truly over. For now he sleeps. The opium does its work. The memories keep their distance. And in this small room in Rome, one damaged man finds rest. Temporary. Imperfect. Chemical. But rest nonetheless. Twilight now. We return to where we began, a garden. Perhaps the same physician's garden from the start of our journey. Perhaps another garden, somewhere else in the vast expanse of Rome's empire. It doesn't matter. The scene is similar. Poppy plants sway gently in the evening breeze. Their seed pods are full, some scored, weeping their milky tears. Other plants grow nearby, henbane, mandrake, cannabis, countless herbs whose names have been lost to time. Each one containing chemistry that can alter human consciousness. The gardener, physician, farmer, priestess, whoever tends these plants, stands at the edge of the garden, surveying the crop. This is ancient work. Humans have been growing these plants, harvesting them, using them for longer than recorded history. The knowledge is older than writing, older than cities, older than civilization itself. What have we learned on our journey through Roman use of consciousness-altering substances? Perhaps that these practices are complex, multifaceted, deeply human. That the substances were used for medicine and recreation. For ritual and escape. For healing and harm. For connection and isolation. That Romans understood these substances both better and worse than we do. Better in the sense that they had generations of accumulated practical knowledge. Worse in the sense that they lacked our scientific understanding of chemistry and neurology. But in both cases, the substances worked. Had effects. Served purposes. Carried risks. The garden grows quiet as darkness falls. Somewhere nearby, a fountain still trickles. The sound is constant, soothing. Like time itself flowing past. Inside the plants, chemistry continues. Molecules are built and stored. Alkaloids accumulate in seed pods and leaves. The plants don't care about human use. They produce these chemicals for their own purposes: defense against insects, communication, reproduction. That humans have co-opted these chemicals is incidental from the plant's perspective. But from the human perspective, it's central. These plants have shaped human culture, human history, human experience. They've eased suffering and caused it. They've enabled religious experience and destroyed lives. They've been tools of mercy and tools of oppression. The Romans were one chapter in this long story. Not the first chapter. Humans were using these substances long before Rome. Not the last chapter. We continue using them today, in different forms, with different understandings, but pursuing similar ends. What persists? The human desire to sometimes experience consciousness differently. To escape pain, whether physical or psychological. To seek pleasure or insight or connection. To modify the raw experience of existence, which can be overwhelming, boring, terrifying, or simply endurable only with help. The plants persist too. Poppies still grow in fields. Cannabis still produces its distinctive leaves and flowers. The chemistry that attracted human attention thousands of years ago still functions. Still offers its double gift of relief and risk. The gardener turns to leave. The garden will be here tomorrow. The plants will continue growing, producing, offering. The cycle continues, season after season, year after year, century after century. Tomorrow, new people will need these plants. Some will use them wisely. Some won't. Some will find healing. Some will find only more suffering. The plants don't discriminate. They offer their chemistry to all equally. And humans will continue making choices about this chemistry. We'll continue debating, regulating, accepting, rejecting. We'll continue the ancient conversation about what it means to alter consciousness, about whether this is wise or foolish, sacred or profane, medicine or poison. Perhaps the answer is that it's all of these, depending on context, intention, dose, setting, person. Perhaps simple answers have never been available and never will be. Perhaps the complexity is the point. The last light fades from the sky. Stars begin to appear. In the garden, in the darkness, the poppies stand silent, waiting for harvest, waiting to fulfill their role in the ongoing human story of seeking altered states. This is not a story with an ending. It's a story that continues. Right now, somewhere, someone is seeking relief from pain. Someone is seeking pleasure. Someone is seeking the divine. Someone is making tea from flowers or resin from seed pods or smoke from sacred resins. The methods change. The substances sometimes change. But the impulse remains. As human as language. As human as art. As human as the desire for something more than ordinary existence. And so we leave our journey here, in this quiet garden at dusk. The poppies will still be here tomorrow. The questions will still be here tomorrow. The complex, messy, inescapable reality of human consciousness seeking to transform itself will still be here tomorrow. For now, let the darkness settle. Let the garden rest. Let the plants grow in silence. And if you have been listening to this story, let yourself drift now too. Let sleep come gently. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Let consciousness shift into the altered state of dreams. The garden is quiet. The night is peaceful. And all is well for now. Rest. Sleep. Dream. Until morning comes again. And so our journey through ancient Rome's relationship with consciousness-altering plants comes to an end. We have walked through gardens and battlefields, temples and marketplaces, private homes and public forums. We have seen how Romans used these substances for medicine and pleasure, for ritual and relief, for survival and transcendence. The story is complex, as human stories always are. There are no simple lessons, no easy judgments. Only the ongoing, eternal human effort to manage existence using whatever tools are available. Thank you for traveling with me through these quiet hours. May you sleep deeply. May your dreams be gentle. And may you wake tomorrow refreshed, ready to face whatever your own life requires. Good night. Rest well. Sleep peacefully.